Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. 17 years ago, he lost everything. Now he's back, not for revenge, but for justice. When a ruthless HOA targets his land with threats, lies, and sabotage, they don't realize. They just declared war on the wrong man. And he's ready to fight, inch by bloody inch. 17 years ago, I stood on this land with my father, barefoot on the cold grass, watching the sun rise over the Blue Ridge horizon. We both knew we were losing the farm. The bank wanted what it wanted, and what it wanted was the house, the barn, the fields, and every inch of soil soaked with Mason sweat over 8 decades. My father didn't say much that day, just stared straight ahead and said, "One day, you'll bring it back, or burn it all down trying." I was 22. Now I'm 39, and I'm back, not with fire, but with paperwork and the kind of grit that comes from losing everything and clawing your way back, inch by bloody inch. They thought no one was watching that auction, but I was. For months, I had alerts set up for every legal whisper tied to Copper Valley Hills, the HOA-backed developer trying to sprawl their pastel monstrosities across my family's bones. They called it a land reserve transition, a quiet reclassification of the old Mason farm as pending community integration, cute phrasing for land theft wrapped in legal tinsel. But the moment that private deal hit the county clerk's site, I hit back harder. Cash buyout, no contingencies, maximum bid. I didn't blink. They didn't even see it coming. The paperwork took 42 hours. The money transfer? 12. I had an old contact in the state zoning office. Owed me from a job overseas, back when I wasn't building barns but fortifying embassies. He fast-tracked the override, parcel designation realigned, land severed from all pending HOA plans. HOA screamed. Of course, claimed the land was functionally annexed. The judge chuckled and stamped the court order like he was approving a fishing license. You can't annex what ain't yours. And just like that, the Mason farm was mine again. No HOA oversight, no zoning strings, no pastel house packages with monthly fees and lawn inspectors, just the wind, the weeds, and the silence I remembered from a lifetime ago. The first morning I drove back up the old gravel path. The place felt haunted, not by ghosts, by the echo of absence. The barn was half collapsed, like it had been punched in the ribs. The farmhouse sagged on its foundation, windows long busted out, roof half gone. The chicken coop was a skeleton. But under the rot and moss, it was all still there. My father's notched fence posts, the rusting tractor half swallowed by kudzu, the old windmill still spinning like it had something to say. I parked my truck near where the front porch used to be. Got out, closed the door slowly, just stood there and listened. No highway noise, no lawnmowers, just birds, the rustle of trees, and the distant bark of something wild. It was perfect. I spent the first day walking the perimeter, reflagging boundary lines with bright orange tape. I'd memorized the new plot survey. 87 acres, all mine, legally partitioned from Copper Valley Hills with an easement path and a grandfathered access road that HOA had accidentally tried to erase from their maps. Not anymore. I reinstalled the old steel gate by hand, dropped a fresh gravel load on the front quarter mile, and hammered in a new sign. Private property. Not HOA land. Trespassers will be recorded. No threats, no posturing, just truth. The second day, I brought in materials. Treated lumber, tarps, waterproof lockboxes, tool chests, solar panels, motion sensors, cable reels, food, water, and 3 military-grade power packs. I wasn't rebuilding. Not yet. I was fortifying. This land had been stolen once. It wouldn't be taken again. That night, I pitched a small tent inside the old barn's shell. Roof mostly gone, floor soft in places, but the bones of the structure were solid. Before I went to sleep, I climbed the old water tower just to see if I could. I could. From up there, I looked down at Copper Valley Hills, their homes all lined in rows, each one identical, every porch light glowing like a row of surveillance bulbs. I imagined them down there, sipping wine, complaining about mailbox paint codes. I smiled. They didn't know I was here yet. That was about to change. On the third morning, I was hammering in a frame brace for the barn's west wall when I heard tires crunching gravel. Not mine, not UPS. Too slow for locals, too smooth for lost tourists. I straightened up, wiped sweat from my eyes, and stepped out into view. 2 men in neon yellow vests stepped out of a matte gray SUV marked Community Enforcement. The logo was embossed but unofficial, stylized oak leaves around the letters CVH. One of them was built like a tank, with a shaved head and a goatee that screamed mall cop energy. The other looked barely 20, tall, quiet, eyes down. The tank walked up first. He didn't smile, didn't offer a name, just said, "You can't be doing this here." I stared at him. Doing what? Unauthorized development on HOA integrated land. I dropped my gloves on the sawhorse and walked over to my tailgate, opened a folder, pulled out 3 copies. Here's the deed transfer. Here's the judicial partition ruling. Here's the zoning exemption approved by the county registrar. You want to see the GPS overlays or the lot line survey too? He didn't take them, just crossed his arms and smirked. Legal tricks don't change community standards. You might have bought the dirt, but if you want to live here in peace, you'll follow the rules. Rules written by whom? I asked. Copper Valley Hills HOA, he said, pointing to his vest like it was a badge. I laughed. Buddy, that vest has less authority than a gas station name tag. You're standing on private land. You have no jurisdiction. So unless you've got a badge or a warrant, I suggest you get back in your Fisher-Price patrol vehicle and roll your ass back to the cul-de-sac. The younger guy, still silent, looked away like he wanted to disappear. The tank leaned in. Close enough I could smell cologne and frustration. You think you're clever, huh? This land doesn't belong to you. Not really. Paper means nothing out here. You want to build a life here? You'll play nice. Or we'll make your stay real short. Then he turned and walked off, like he'd dropped the mic. The kid followed. They got in their SUV, didn't even look back, and drove off slow, like they wanted me to remember the moment. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't say a word. I just watched them leave, then turned back to my tools. Let them think it was over. I was just getting started. 3 days. That's how long the silence lasted. I spent those 72 hours clearing brush, inventorying supplies, and laying the first foundation posts for a new equipment shed. No sign of the HOA boys. Not a single SUV creeping up the gravel. No angry letters duct taped to my gate. No drone buzzing overhead. Almost made me think they'd backed off. Then came day 4. It started just after sunrise. I was hauling lumber from the back of the truck when I noticed tire tracks. New ones. They ran parallel to the ones I'd made with my own vehicle, but veered off toward the west fence line. Problem was, I hadn't driven out that way yet. The ground was soft from rain the night before, and whoever it was had left deep ruts in the earth. Someone had been on my land. Again. I followed the trail with a calm I didn't feel. The tracks ended at the far edge of the property, right where I'd put up the new gate sign 2 days ago. The sign was gone. Just the splintered post remained, lying at an awkward angle like it had been kicked, then run over for good measure. The chain was snapped clean in 2. That's when it got personal. I didn't bother calling anyone. Not yet. Instead, I checked the motion-triggered cameras I'd hidden in the nearby pine stand. The footage was grainy in the low light, but good enough to see the familiar SUV nosing through the gate around 3 in the morning. Same gray body, same community enforcement decal. 2 figures. They didn't just remove the sign, they took their time, laughed, posed for a goddamn photo. One of them even mooned the camera. Classy. I zoomed in. It was Roid Rage and Silent Luke. I'd already started giving them nicknames in my head. Helps me keep calm. Later that afternoon, I drove into town for supplies, stopped by the county office to file a copy of the footage and note the trespassing. No official complaint? Not yet. Just making sure it was on the record in case things escalated. The clerk nodded slowly while watching the clip, said nothing, just raised an eyebrow and muttered, "They're still doing this crap?" That told me more than I needed to know. That evening, I was back on the farm tightening the last bolts on a temporary wind brace when I heard the crunch of gravel again. This time, I was ready. I slid behind a stack of lumber, hand on the grip of my sidearm. Not drawn, just considered. The SUV pulled up slow. Same vehicle. This time, only one guy stepped out. Luke. He looked different without the tank of a partner, less sure of himself. He stood by the hood for a while, hands in pockets, shifting his weight like someone who wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how to begin. I stayed hidden. Eventually, he pulled something out of his coat pocket. A laminated sign, one of the cheap metal ones HOA plants all over their community lawns. HOA enforcement zone. All work must be approved. He approached the gate and bolted it to my newly repaired post, drilled it in like he had every right. I stepped out. "Bold move," I said. My voice came out sharper than I intended. You planning to leave that there? Or are we playing some kind of neighborhood scavenger hunt? He flinched, visibly. I'm just doing what I was told, he mumbled. They said enforcement zone protocols apply within a 5-mile radius of community borders. I raised an eyebrow. And what statute is that under? Fantasy HOA law? You think proximity equals jurisdiction? He shrugged. Look, I don't want any trouble. Roy said we're supposed to keep things orderly. Roy, I echoed. Let me guess, he's the one who told you to rip down my sign and slash the gate chain. He looked away. You know I've got footage, right? Your car, your face, your little moon show. His ears went red. I didn't know we were being recorded, he said. Roy said it wasn't surveillance active, that the guy out here was just bluffing. Roy's going to get you in a lot more than embarrassment if you keep listening to him. He turned, started to retreat. Luke, I said, and he paused. You ever wonder why a security outfit that supposedly operates under a civic HOA has no badges, no licenses, and no paper trail? He didn't respond, just walked back to the SUV and drove off. No smirks this time, just speed. That night, the game changed. I started noticing the watchers. First, it was a white hatchback parked just beyond the tree line. Lights off, engine idling. Every time I got close, it would roll away slow, like it had just happened to be there. Then it was a man walking his dog back and forth along the public easement 3 times in a row. Same dog, same time, same pause near my front gate. The next day, a drone hovered overhead for a solid 5 minutes before zipping away toward the cul-de-sac. They weren't subtle. They didn't want to be. On the 5th day, I woke up to find someone had slashed the front tire of my pickup. Clean surgical cut. Not a slow leak. A message. I spent 2 hours patching and replacing it. Then I walked a full loop of the property and installed the next tier of surveillance. Night vision trail cams, IR sensors, acoustic mics disguised in birdhouses. I ran power from solar panels to a central feed in the barn. I wasn't just building a home anymore. I was building a trap. By week's end, the community enforcement squad had made 4 more unsanctioned visits, all caught on tape. I cataloged each one, date-stamped, indexed, uploaded. No contact from police, no formal complaints, which told me they weren't logging these visits officially. That, more than anything, pissed me off. See, if you're going to threaten a man, do it straight. Don't hide behind HOA acronyms and vest cosplay. Don't pretend to be peacekeepers when you're just another flavor of thug. That's the thing about people like Roy. They think because they wrap their power in procedure, it makes them righteous. They were wrong. I'd been in worse jungles. And if they wanted a war, they were standing in the wrong damn field. By the time the 2nd week rolled around, the Mason farm didn't look like a restoration project anymore. It looked like a forward operating base. The barn's skeleton had been reinforced, the roof patched enough to hold solar panels, and inside I'd built a secure corner with insulated walls, power storage, data terminals, and my old favorite, the surveillance array. 3 screens, 5 feeds, 16 cameras. I called it the Roost. From there, I could see every tree line, every approach, every dumb bastard who thought they could sneak through my woods without leaving footprints. And they tried. Oh, they tried. On Monday night, someone parked under the old hickory tree near the West Gully and killed their lights. Didn't even get out of the car, just sat there with a cigarette burning like a firefly. I watched them for 40 minutes. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Then I cut the feed, waited 10 minutes, and walked out with my flashlight and a sidearm holstered, nice and legal. The car peeled out before I even got within 50 feet. Cowards playing night games. The following day, I got an envelope duct taped to my gate. No postage, no return address. Classic HOA guerrilla correspondence. Inside was a printed notice, styled like it came from some official township board. Same font as a real zoning order, even a fake county seal. But I knew the clerk who did the real notices, and her documents didn't come on printer paper from Staples. The letter said, "Your continued unauthorized structural modifications have been deemed in violation of the Copper Valley Hills Community Construction Guidelines. Further action may include daily fines and formal proceedings." I nearly laughed. Not because it wasn't serious, but because it was stupid. I already had a court ruling stating I was exempt from the HOA, carved out of their zone like a tumor they'd failed to remove in time. And yet here they were, bluffing again. Desperation has a smell, and this one reeked of sweat and printer ink. Still, it meant one thing. They weren't trying to intimidate anymore. They were trying to build a paper trail. So I built something too. Redundancy. Every camera now had a backup on a separate circuit, feeding 2 cloud servers, one private, one decoy. Motion detectors were upgraded with passive IR overlays. I reprogrammed the motion alerts to ping me silently, so I didn't even have to watch the screen. I just got a buzz. And I knew. From bed, from the woods, from the damn outhouse if I had to. Then I installed my personal favorite, the tripline lasers. Not visible to the naked eye, not strong enough to trigger alarms by accident. These were paired with thermal pings and automated taggers. If something crossed that line at night, I'd know how tall they were, how fast they moved, and exactly where they went. I was no longer just recording, I was mapping. That Friday, I caught them red-handed. 2 in the morning. Feed went active. Camera 7 picked up movement near the tool shed I'd built behind the old root cellar. I hit record and watched as 2 figures, Roy, unmistakable with that linebacker gait, and someone smaller, crept toward my barn wall with bolt cutters. They weren't subtle, they were practiced. Roy knelt down by the siding, aimed his flashlight, and began cutting into the weatherproof conduit box. Probably thought it ran to a breaker. It didn't. It ran to a dummy panel. And one of my gifts. The moment he popped the seal, a piercing siren went off inside the barn. Not loud enough for the neighborhood, but enough to scramble their nerves. Lights inside the barn lit up red. A pre-recorded voice boomed out. Unlawful access detected. Property breach logged. Local sheriff notified. All data uploaded. Please remain in place. They bolted. Roy tripped first, got caught in a steel wire strung ankle-high between 2 poles. He went down face first, dropped the cutters, and skidded into a patch of wild nettles. The second guy, Luke of course, made it 5 more steps before triggering a motion-activated strobe that blinded him cold. He staggered and slammed into a post. I watched all of it on camera, sipping stale coffee like it was movie night. I didn't go outside. Not yet. Let them scramble. Let them crawl. By the time I did step out, calmly, in boots and bathrobe, they were gone. Roy had managed to limp back to the SUV, which I caught on camera 11 backing down the gravel road at speed. Luke wasn't limping, but he kept looking back, like he wanted to say something, or maybe apologize. The next morning, I exported every second of footage, compressed it, encrypted it, and uploaded it to 3 drives, 2 on site, 1 remote. Then I called my friend Wes in Richmond. He ran a small, independent journalist blog that specialized in local corruption. I didn't give him the full story yet, just a sample, enough to make his eyebrows lift. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "Just a teaser," I said. "Think HOA watchdogs gone rogue." Wes chuckled. "Hell yes, this smells like page 1. By Sunday, I had new signs up. Warning, active surveillance. Trespassers will be digitally embarrassed." And I meant it. I wasn't calling the sheriff. Not yet. If I had my way, I'd gather every last drop of proof. Not just trespassing, but patterns, threats, organized sabotage. I wasn't going to stop a single incident. I was going to prove a campaign, an operation. And when I dropped it all, it would be nuclear. It was around 9:30 on a Monday when the sheriff's deputy showed up. Unmarked cruiser, clean-shaven kid in a tan uniform, the kind they issue to fresh hires who haven't earned coffee stains yet. He stepped out like he was already tired of whatever he'd been sent for, checked a clipboard, and said my name like it tasted bad. "Mr. Daniel Mason." I was halfway through wiring solar conduit under the porch frame. I stood up, dusted my gloves on my jeans, and nodded. "That's me." He exhaled and flipped the clipboard toward me. "You've been named in a civil complaint filed by the Copper Valley Hills Homeowners Association." He tried to hand me the paper like it was radioactive. I took it without blinking. "Civil complaint," I repeated, flat. "What's the charge?" "Harassment, threat of physical violence, interference with community security personnel." I stared at him. "You're saying they're accusing me of harassing them?" "That's what's filed, sir." I unfolded the packet. 3 pages, full of florid language and fake legalese, claimed I had verbally threatened and obstructed HOA security during lawful patrol procedures. One section described me as militant and unstable, suggesting I had military training and possible combat PTSD. I nearly laughed out loud. The signature at the bottom? Lucas Foster. My throat went cold for a second, not from fear, from fury. I knew damn well Lucas hadn't written this. Not in his words, not in his voice. Someone had used his name, and I had the footage to prove it. Is there a court date? I asked. Preliminary hearing in 8 days, he said. But until then, you're instructed to refrain from direct contact with HOA staff or representatives. Great, I said. I'll send them a fruit basket. The deputy didn't laugh. He handed me a second sheet. Notice of a temporary injunction. No more construction until the hearing. Standard scare tactic. They wanted to freeze me in place. Slow me down. Make me feel isolated. I thanked the deputy, watched him leave, and walked back to the barn. Then I called my attorney. Her name was Andrea Cole, and she'd been my legal pit bull since I started doing private security infrastructure in East Africa. She didn't say hello, just, tell me it's not HOA crap again. It's HOA crap again, I said. She asked for the case number, read through the complaint in silence, then finally muttered, they're getting desperate. The language is overreaching and the signatory is vulnerable. You said you've got footage. I've got everything, I told her. Time-stamped, geotagged, synced with sound and camera overlay. They've been trespassing, sabotaging equipment, even tried to vandalize my main conduit line. And this morning, I'm apparently the threat. Andrea hummed. We're going to dismantle this in one sitting. But I want to file a counter motion to dismiss and a preliminary protective order, just in case they try to pull a fast one with the sheriff's office. Good, I said, because I'm not stopping. That afternoon, while Andrea fired off motions and declarations, I got a call. Unknown number, no voicemail. Then another. On the third ring, I picked up. Silence, then a familiar voice. Hey, it's Luke. I almost hung up. Almost, but something in his voice wasn't the same as before. It wasn't robotic or smug or weak. It was unsure. You've got about 10 seconds to explain, I said. I didn't file that complaint, he said quickly. I swear, they made me sign a draft sheet. Roy said it was a routine incident report just for record keeping. I didn't know it was going to court. I stayed quiet. I didn't want to come back to your place, Luke continued. But they kept pushing. Roy said if I didn't cooperate, they'd say I was working against the HOA, that I was feeding you information. Were you? I asked. Silence. Then, not yet. I took a long breath. So why are you calling me now? Because what they're doing. It's not about zoning anymore, he said. They've got meetings with people who aren't on the HOA roster. Roy's talking to private contractors. There's this folder, internal communications, emails, plans to expand the HOA's perimeter authority through non-regulatory actions. I don't know what it means, but I know it's not legal. You have it? I asked. I have copies, he said. On a drive, I'll get it to you. That was when I heard the knock at the barn door. I froze. Luke, I whispered, where are you? Not there, he said quickly, but someone else might be. I hung up and moved to the corner, slipping behind a false wall I'd built inside the barn. A soft knock again. Then a woman's voice. Mr. Mason, this is Karen Whitfield. I'd like to speak with you. The Queen herself. Karen Whitfield, head of the HOA Council, known tyrant of Copper Valley Hills. I hadn't seen her yet, only heard her name muttered in warnings, like a ghost that carried fines and subpoenas instead of chains. Now she was knocking on my barn door like this was some church picnic. I stepped out slowly, keeping one hand on the inside panel of the door frame where I'd mounted the panic switch, just in case. She was dressed in a crisp cream blouse, tasteful earrings, and a calm smile that didn't reach her eyes, flanked by two others, clipboard girl and some guy in a golf polo who looked like he'd sell you a mortgage with a side of condescension. I assume you're aware of the pending complaint, she said with no preamble. I'm aware of the farce, yes. She tilted her head like I'd amused her. No need for hostility, Mr. Mason. We're simply trying to maintain order in a growing community. On land you don't own, and where you have no authority. The court will decide that, she said, smiling tighter. But we're here with a proposal. She handed me a manila envelope. Inside, a printed agreement. HOA would voluntarily withdraw the complaint if I agreed to a permanent cooperation clause, which included prior approval for any modifications to the property, adherence to community guidelines, and a modest monthly fee. Modest, I repeated, as in extortion disguised as peace. Let's not get dramatic, she said. I folded the paper neatly and handed it back. Tell Roy, I said, that next time he wants to send a threat, He better not use a kid to do it. And tell your people that my property isn't a sandbox for bored tyrants in pastel shirts." Karen didn't flinch, but her smile faded a fraction. "You're making a mistake," she said. "No," I replied. "You did. When you assumed I was just another city idiot with a debt problem and a dream." She turned and walked away. Her little entourage followed, faces stiff. And as she passed the front gate, she muttered to Clipboard Girl, just loud enough for my parabolic mic to catch it, "We'll burn that barn if he doesn't play ball." I smiled, because now I had her on tape too. I didn't sleep that night. Not from fear, from anticipation. I sat in the barn's roost with coffee and a cigarette I didn't even light, just chewing the filter while I watched the feed cycle through each camera. Motion triggers blinked idle. The woods were quiet. But I knew better than to mistake quiet for peace. Karen had crossed the line, not metaphorically, literally. That HOA queen pin stood on my land, flanked by henchmen, and casually whispered about arson like she was choosing a brunch spot. I had her on audio, time-stamped, geo-tagged, voice-isolated. Hell, I even ran it through an old software suite we used overseas for identifying low-frequency threats in insurgent chatter. It flagged her as hostile actor. That made me chuckle. Andrea was already preparing the affidavit, but we weren't ready to strike yet. Not until we caught them red-handed, not just in threat, but in action. We had to show the pattern, the intent, the execution. So I built a trap. It wasn't theatrical. No paint buckets on ropes or exploding glitter bombs. This was a subtle lure, an irresistible crack in the armor I knew they couldn't resist poking. I programmed a fake alert into the system, made it look like my western perimeter had gone dark. One camera offline, 2 sensors dropped from the cloud. I even staged a half-finished ladder propped under the barn side panel like I'd been mid-repair when something interrupted me. Then I waited. First night? Nothing. Second? A drone, low and fast, zipped across the tree line. I tracked it with a heat camera, commercial model. That meant they were scouting, not acting. Third night. It happened. 2 figures approached around 2:40 a.m. Same SUV, parked farther down the gravel now, tucked behind scrub pine. They came on foot. Roy and Lucas again. Roy had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Probably tools, maybe more. Lucas looked jumpier than usual. I could see it in the way he moved, halting, hesitant. They crept around the side of the barn and paused at the access panel, the very one I'd forgotten to lock properly. Roy popped it open and shone a flashlight inside. Then he said something that got picked up on my directional mic. "Yep, this dumb bastard's got a gap, told you." Lucas didn't respond. Roy reached into the bag and pulled out a wire stripper and some kind of small device, probably a shorting tool or signal blocker. That's when I flipped the switch. Not manually. It was automated. The second Roy touched the pressure sensor under the panel lip, the system triggered silently. Lights in the barn flashed red. An amplified voice activated from the corner speaker. "Intrusion detected. Uploading real-time data to local authorities. Your location is being recorded." The best part? I wasn't bluffing. The system did push alerts straight to Andrea, my sheriff's liaison, and 2 press contacts, one of whom had been tracking HOA harassment in the state for over a year. If I was going down, I wasn't going alone. Roy panicked first. He dropped the tool and shouted, "Move!" Then bolted for the corner of the barn. That's where the laser tripwire was. He hit it at full speed and got tagged by the flash strobe. Military grade, meant to disorient. He stumbled, twisted, and went down hard, face first into a patch of mud that hadn't seen the sun in days. Lucas stood frozen. He wasn't running. He wasn't yelling. Just staring at the barn, the lights, the speakers now cycling through a warning tone every 5 seconds. I watched him raise his hands and mutter, "I told him." Then, in a move I didn't expect, Lucas turned and walked into the barn through the open side door, slowly, deliberately. And he sat down, on an overturned bucket, like a man who had nothing left to hide. I waited 15 minutes before stepping out. Didn't come out with a weapon, didn't raise my voice. Just flicked on the barn's overheads and stood there in the doorway. Lucas looked up, eyes wide, not in fear, but something else. "I'm done," he said. "I know," I replied. We didn't say much after that. I helped him clean the mud off Roy's discarded tools and bagged everything with gloves. Evidence. Every second of that night was recorded. 3 angles, thermal overlays, audio synced. As for Roy, he was long gone. The SUV had peeled out minutes after he went down, left Lucas behind without a second thought. Cowards don't wait for accountability. We talked later, inside the barn. He didn't ask for immunity, didn't try to weasel out, just told me what he knew. Roy had been running point on unofficial enforcement missions for the HOA for over a year. Most of them were harmless. Noise complaints, lawn citations, pestering renters about gutter colors. But it escalated when Copper Valley Hills started expansion talks. That's when they started targeting holdout properties, pressuring old landowners to sell, manufacturing violations, sabotaging fences, sending fines that didn't exist. Your place wasn't supposed to be a problem, Lucas said. The developers thought it was dormant, that they'd get it by default. When you bought it, Roy took it personally. What about Karen? I asked. She's worse, he said. She doesn't even think the rules apply to her. She calls the law optional in meetings, says if someone makes trouble, they'll be handled informally. She said that exact word, informally. He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a flash drive. What's this? Meeting notes, recordings, internal memos, things they don't put in official documents. I looked at him. Why help me now? He hesitated, then said, because I used to think HOA was about safety, about keeping the community clean. But this is a gang in cardigans. I nodded, took the drive. Go home, Luke. You're going to be the reason they burn, not me. The next morning wasn't quiet. At 7:15, my inbox blew up like I'd declared war on the suburbs. Andrea had pushed the footage and Lucas's drive to our press contacts overnight. Wes, my friend in Richmond, was first out the gate with the article. Paramilitary HOA? Private security harasses veteran landowner in Copper Valley Hills. Front page material. By 10 a.m., the footage had gone viral. Every major platform was running clips. Roy stumbling into the mud. Karen's offhand arson threat. Luke's sit-down surrender. 5 different journalists requested interviews. I declined. I wasn't here for 15 minutes of fame. I was here to end the goddamn war. Around noon, my phone rang. Caller ID. Andrea, you're not going to believe this, she said, already halfway to laughing. Karen just filed a motion to dismiss the complaint against you. I blinked. That was fast. She must have realized the court discovery phase would rip her to pieces, probably trying to minimize damage control. Too late, I said, spinning slowly in the chair in the barn's command center. Wes uploaded the clip of her threatening to burn my barn, tagged her personal Facebook and the HOA website. Andrea whistled. Then she's officially done. Not yet, I said. Let's finish it. She was already ahead of me. That afternoon, she filed a civil counterclaim for defamation, harassment, trespassing, property damage, and fraudulent use of civil complaint processes, all backed with footage, logs, timestamps, and Luke's corroboration. Roy's name was listed directly, Karen's indirectly sent for now. But the best part? The flash drive. Luke hadn't just handed over meeting notes. He'd given us 2 recorded boardroom calls and a PowerPoint presentation labeled Peripheral Property Management Opportunities. It sounded innocent until you heard the actual audio. Karen, in her usual syrupy tone, discussing how properties adjacent to HOA zones can be pressured into compliance through indirect enforcement and legal ambiguity. Her words. She even called it gray zone leverage. It sounded less like community planning and more like corporate racketeering. I sent copies to 2 state journalists and 1 very curious federal zoning official I happened to know from a past job. The gears were in motion now, and once you get the government involved, things start rolling downhill real fast. But Karen wasn't done. Late that evening, I noticed a new vehicle parked at the far side of the easement road. Silver sedan, tinted windows, just sitting there. I watched it on camera for 20 minutes. Then it started to creep forward, slow, careful, like it didn't want to be noticed. It stopped near the gate, and out stepped Karen, not in a pantsuit, not with a clipboard. She wore a baseball cap, sunglasses, and a hooded sweatshirt. She looked like someone sneaking out of a cheating scandal. She glanced around, reached into her pocket, and taped an envelope to my gate. Then she turned and walked back to her car, calm, like this was just another neighborly chat. Inside the envelope, a single handwritten note. Let's not ruin lives. You've made your point. I can make this go away. No signature, no contact info, just that. I scanned the note, filed it, and dropped it into the evidence folder. The arrogance was incredible. After everything, trespass, sabotage, fake lawsuits, veiled threats, She still thought this was just a matter of negotiation. She wanted me to back down, let her walk away, maybe save face. But this wasn't about me anymore. That evening, the sheriff's office called. Lucas had voluntarily come in and provided a full written statement, attaching his testimony to our counterclaim. He confirmed everything: Roy's missions, Karen's orders, and the plan to handle my land through intimidation and false filings. He even turned over a printed email thread where Roy joked about calling in anonymous tips to code enforcement to cause delays. That was the moment I knew the dominoes were falling. Roy was arrested the next morning, booked on trespassing, attempted sabotage, and filing a false report. They picked him up at his house where, according to Wes, he tried to hide in the garage behind a freezer. Classic. Karen. Well, she was smarter. She filed a sick leave notice with the HOA council and temporarily stepped down from operations. That was cute. Like calling arson threats a sabbatical, but the press was already circling. I got a call from a producer at a national morning show. Declined again. I wasn't interested in being a face for rural resistance or becoming some poster boy for landowner rights. All I wanted was peace and the public destruction of every rotten mechanism that let people like Karen think they could rule by intimidation. The icing on the cake came that night. Wes messaged me a private link. Leaked HOA chair caught threatening arson in court hallway. It was the courthouse camera feed. One of the reporters had FOIA'd it fast. The hallway was grainy, but the audio was crisp. Karen, I don't care what the judge says. We'll burn that barn if he doesn't leave. The internet exploded. HOA's PR firm, yes they had one, issued a statement saying the footage was taken out of context. Comment sections laughed them into the grave. Within 12 hours, 3 board members resigned. 2 residents of Copper Valley Hills went on record anonymously saying they'd been pressured into supporting Karen's initiatives under threat of fines and zoning complaints. By the end of the week, the HOA was hemorrhaging leadership. And I was just getting ready for the fun part. They say justice is slow, but in this case, it came fast and in high definition. By Monday morning, I had more reporters trying to get onto my property than I had goats. News vans sat just beyond the easement like vultures in windbreakers, cameras ready, waiting to catch Karen doing a perp walk or Roy crying into a courthouse step. I kept the gate locked and the cameras rolling. This wasn't a media circus. It was an execution of lies, of threats, of everything that HOA tried to pass off as community protection. Sheriff's deputies showed up again that day, this time not with a complaint, but with a warrant. Not for me, for Karen. I watched through the thermal lens as 2 officers knocked on her door just after 10 a.m. They didn't even wait for her to put on makeup. She answered in a robe, and from the way she tried to slam the door shut, too late, she knew what was coming. The charges weren't flashy, but they were precise. Conspiracy to commit trespassing, solicitation of arson, attempted fraud in civil filings, and tampering with enforcement records. And then came the real blow. The state zoning board filed a formal injunction against Copper Valley Hills HOA, freezing all expansion plans pending an internal audit and legal review. It was like watching a tree collapse in slow motion. You saw the cracks before the fall, and then, snap. Meanwhile, Andrea was lining up the civil suit like a marksman with all the time in the world. With Luke's testimony, the footage, the documents, the drone paths, the planted signs, the vandalism, the threats, we had enough to bury them under a mountain of paper. And the residents of Copper Valley Hills. They turned. It started with a letter, anonymous at first, slipped under my gate. Then another, then emails, messages, 17 in total by the end of the week. Homeowners apologizing, explaining. Some didn't know what Karen was doing. Others knew, but were afraid to speak up. The fines, the violations, the social ostracism for dissent. It had been a culture of fear disguised as landscaping rules. One message stood out. It was from a woman named Natalie, a single mother who'd bought into the neighborhood 2 years earlier. Mr. Mason, I'm so sorry for what they did to you. They threatened to raise my dues if I didn't sign a petition against you. They told us you were a danger. I believe them. I'm ashamed. If there's anything I can do, just ask. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, just exhaustion. You can't build a life on apologies. But it did confirm what I'd suspected. Copper Valley Hills had been a neighborhood in name only. Under Karen's boot, it had become a suburban dictatorship. The press conference came 3 days later. Organized by the county board after public pressure became unbearable. They set it up at the town square, just off Main Street. A podium, 2 flags, a county seal flapping in the breeze. The sheriff was there, the zoning commissioner. A handful of HOA survivors who jumped ship once the house started burning. And then came the moment I didn't expect. Karen walked out, not in cuffs, not in disguise, in a blazer and pearls, like nothing had changed. Her lawyer stood beside her, the smarmiest man I'd ever seen, all teeth and gel. They approached the podium, the cameras surged forward, and Karen raised a shaking paper in her hand. "I'd like to read a statement," she said, voice thin. She cleared her throat. "On behalf of the Copper Valley Hills Homeowners Association, I wish to extend our formal apology to Mr. Daniel Mason for the actions taken by individuals within our leadership that overstepped boundaries, violated ethical conduct, and undermined the principles of community stewardship. We acknowledge these actions were inappropriate and illegal. We regret the harm caused." She stopped, blinked, looked at her lawyer. He nodded. Then she stepped down, and in a moment that felt like it came from a movie I wouldn't believe if I hadn't seen it, she walked across the stage, turned to me where I stood off to the side, and dropped to her knees. Not for long, maybe 3 seconds. Just enough for the cameras to flash, the crowd to gasp, and the lawyer to whisper, "That's enough." But it happened. Roy wasn't there. He was sitting in county jail, awaiting his pretrial hearing. His lawyer was begging for a plea deal, but with the footage, there wasn't much room left. Andrea leaned over and whispered in my ear, "You ready for the payout?" I said nothing. Just watched Karen stand back up and disappear into the crowd like a melting shadow. 2 days later, the HOA, what was left of it, agreed to a full settlement, $380,000 in damages. No negotiation, no appeal. The moment the check cleared, Andrea sent me a screenshot. Subject line, "Return of the Mason." I didn't celebrate. Instead, I walked back to the barn, took down the tripwires, turned off the perimeter sirens, and opened every window in the house. The war was over, but the land still needed healing. It rained the morning I took the old Mason sign out of storage. Thick drops, slow and steady, like the land was exhaling after holding its breath too long. I propped the wooden board against the fence post, brushed off 17 years of dust and regret, and began sanding it down. Under the flaking paint, I could still see the faded carving. Mason Family Farm, S. 1941. Not a corporation, not a subdivision, a family, a legacy. By noon, the rain stopped. I planted the sign just past the gravel where the HOA's fake enforcement zone plaque used to hang. Only now, beside it, I added a second sign, one I'd burned into fresh pine myself. This land is not under HOA jurisdiction. Ever again. I meant every word. People started visiting after that. Not reporters, not gawkers. Locals. A man who said his grandfather bought eggs from us in the 70s. A woman who used to ride horses near the ridge when she was a kid. They brought stories, not microphones. Some helped me raise a new greenhouse frame. Others donated tools, seed, even an old chicken coop that just needed patching. Luke came by once quietly, left a bag of nails and 2 cartons of screws on the porch. Said nothing. Just nodded. I nodded back. HOA? Gone. 3 months after the settlement, the remaining board members dissolved Copper Valley Hills HOA entirely. A vote passed by a staggering margin. No more dues, no more patrols, no more Karen. People were planting flowers where they'd once feared citations. And me? I rebuilt. A greenhouse now sits where the surveillance barn used to be. Solar-powered, naturally ventilated, filled with peppers, squash, and tomatoes, as sweet as summer itself. I run a weekend market from the front lot. Kids run barefoot again. The land breathes. So do I.